All right, this past weekend, UFC had a big event, but unfortunately for them, their main event saw both fighters, Nick Diaz and Anderson Silva, fail their drug tests. One actually was in January, early January, when Anderson Silva took a drug test and failed for steroids, and then Nick Diaz failed his post-fight test for marijuana. No big surprise there. That follows up Jon Jones failing not too recently. They found out he failed a test for cocaine. As a top-level athlete yourself, what are your thoughts on what's going on with UFC and their drug failures right now?
First of all, you can't ever be okay and look the other way with those kinds of failing drug tests. You can't condone any of that kind of stuff. I say that, and I also say the pressure that these guys sometimes feel that they face is that they have to perform at a certain level, or they have to look a certain way, or they have to be a certain, have a certain outcome. And given that, they can take the shortcuts. Listen, man, that's not okay. It's not okay to take the drug. It's not okay to fight with the drug. It's not okay to have those, to cheat. Those things are just disgusting for the sport. Especially, not that there's ever okay when to do it, but especially at this level. I mean, everyone wants to see Anderson come back. Everybody wants to see him fight, Diaz, and everybody wants to see, what's going to happen to him after the injury and whatnot. And it should have been a great fight. But some of these guys sometimes forget about really what the fans really want, and forget about the ethics and the moral makeup of the game, and that's where it comes all crashing down. I mean, look at it now. He can never be taken seriously again. He can never be taken. He can never be respected again. It's bad. It's ugly.
Well, that's the thing. You have drug failures are nothing new to boxing, kickboxing, MMA, anything. But I can't recall any time when you had three such prominent stars. I mean, Anderson Silva and Jon Jones are probably two of the three biggest names in MMA. Nick Diaz is pretty popular himself. So having people that stature fail, does that really cripple UFC right now at a time where their popularity seems to be slipping a little bit anyway?
I think the question is, how can it not? I think that somebody at that level and those fight calibers, I mean, you're talking about the three really biggest names in MMA right now. Especially, in the Jones one was just crazy. I mean, taking cocaine, being at that level, I mean, the key is going to be, in order for them to recover, is how the UFC is able to cope with that, and what the UFC does in order to, put some mandates or any kind of, stringent policies on how they should be tested, and what happens to a guy like that. Jon Jones, I think, entered rehab for, I think it was a day, wasn't it? He went in and out in a day, and what is that, a slap on the wrist, and then these performance-enhancing drugs. You're talking about the biggest name, one of the greatest, they call him, the greatest of all time to step in the octagon, Anderson Silva, and he's taking it. Man, it's bad. Because that starts looking at your history and says, man, how long have you been taking that kind of stuff?
And then what about the UFC as far as, with Jones and Silva? Jones failed this test well in advance of his fight. Anderson Silva, at the time of the interview, I'm not sure when they found out, but he took the test January 9th, so we know that. So they should, you'd think, already have known about that going into the fight. What do you think them allowing their guys to fight, or, whether they allowed him to fight or whether they had to allow him to fight based on laws, either way, what do you think that does to the credibility of UFC, allowing their fighters getting in main event fights, having failed drug tests?
I think to answer all that is what their next step is going to be now. Because all eyes right now are on Dana White and his administration saying, okay, how are you going to deal with this? How are you going to handle this? It cripples it. It could really cripple the UFC because of the caliber guys that they are. I mean, these aren't just small fish in the pond. These are your main event guys. So let's see how they respond. Let's hope to God that they can, come up with some kind of mandate, some kind of adjusting. But for a fighter, I mean, what you're doing ultimately, put aside everything else, you're cheating, man.
Yeah. And then what about?
There's no room for that.
What about Nick Diaz? Weed is, I don't even say arguably, but it's less harmful than cocaine and then steroids. But he has such a reputation for doing that anyway. Right. Putting a guy in their main event that shocks nobody that he failed his drug test. Again, what is allowing someone like that to compete, knowing his history? At least
did Diaz test positive for marijuana? Is that what it was?
Yes.
And plus the PED, right?
No. Anderson Silva did the steroids. Nick Diaz failed for marijuana.
Okay. I'm not saying any drug is bad. Any drug is bad. Everything is bad. But there are levels of that, right? First of all, I don't condone any of it. I think it's all horrible. But a performance-enhancing drug is obviously on a different scale because that's actually coming in cheap. for Diaz trying to come up with that persona of being, the bad boy, I don't care, doing all that kind of stuff. Come on, man, save that stuff for me. The bottom line is this, man. You got kids looking up to you. You got fans. You got fighters. I mean, you go in these UFC gyms across the country, or these MMA gyms across the country, even boxing gyms, kickboxing gyms. People look up to you, man. They idolize you. You do some bozo stuff like that, man. What kind of message are you sending to everybody? That's okay?
Yeah.
Nonsense.
And then what about yourself? I know, especially with your personal beliefs, and especially with your religion, that you don't really do anything that's going to alter your body or not make you pure. So for yourself, do you worry that when you go into the ring with someone else, that even though you've done everything you're supposed to do, that maybe they've done the same thing? And how does that affect your preparation or fight?
You always hope so. You always hope so. At the end of the day, man, you never know. I've made mistakes in my life, never with drugs or anything like that. And you falter and you do those kinds of things, and I'm okay with that. But to cheat and where you can actually physically hurt and end someone's career, there is no justification. That is a lifetime ban. There is nothing that can justify that.
And then very last thing, if you were someone fighting, let's say it's found out that Anderson Silva did indeed, they knew about his failed test before the fight.
Oh, that's
How
even
pissed
worse.
would you be if you knew you fought someone that the organization had allowed to fight after taking a picture?
Listen, that's the end of the UFC if that happened. Mark my words. If they ended up knowing about it and they put it in, it's a wrap.
All right.
It's a wrap.
All right, man. Thanks.